nice to see you here.
John's had a good
No, but you said you're going to
We welcome everybody.
Yeah, everybody welcome and nice to see you all here.
And the programme, Joe.
And the speakers tonight are Christian Hogsbjerg, Joseph Williams and Arthur France. And the Maguire Society presents the rediscovery of the CLR James play, lost since 1936. Christian.
Thank you very much, Joe.
And thanks everyone for coming. Thanks also to the Maguire Society Guard, in particular for helping organise this event. It's very fitting to have it in the Leeds West Indian Centre. CLR James once declared Toussaint Louverture first and greatest of West Indians, really. So it's a very appropriate place to have it. Very grateful to West Indian Centre for hosting this. The period we're talking about really with the play, you mentioned 1936, is the 1930s, so it's a time of capitalist crisis, economic depression, rising threat of fascism, a national government in Britain of Tories and Liberals pushing austerity politics, the Labour Party not really doing very much about it. So it's a very, very different world from the world we're living in now. You can't think of mass unemployment or anything like that. CLR James came to Britain in 1932 from Trinidad, from colonial Trinidad. And he was a campaigner for what was the West Indian self-government at the time. He was also a cricket writer for Manchester Guardian. So he would have actually come to Leeds, actually, I think, after heading the reported matches and things, sometime in the 30s. He wrote the play in 1934, and it was performed 2 years later on the London stage, Westminster Theatre in 1936. There were two performances of it. It had Paul Robeson, a gentle giant, sort of great black American star of the stage and screen, and starring in the title role. Remember, the play didn't get performed for various reasons we can discuss. I mean, it was kind of it was sort of, to some extent, it was presumed lost on some level. More to the point, though, James in the 1960s rewrote the play with the help of the guys Dexter and Lindsay, and renamed the play called The Black Jacobin. So, slightly different play, and that play was put on. It's been staged in various places, Caribbean, Africa. It was staged in London in 1986 with Ken Livingston's GLC at the Riverside Studios. And so that play has been published. The later version of the play has been published and performed. And so, to some sense, there was a sense that was James's play, if you like. You know, this earlier one kind of got a little bit kind of forgotten to some extent. And I started work on CLR James as a PhD student about 10 years ago on James's time in the 1930s. It was a critical time for James. It was a time when he moved from being a novelist, which he was essentially a writer in the Caribbean, to becoming a kind of political activist, a leading anti-colonial figure in Britain, trying to bring down the British Empire, essentially with the help of people like George Padmore, Jomo Kenyatta, various Pan-Africanist activists. It was also a time he became a leading sort of figure in the early tiny British Trotskyist movement as well, writing books called World Revolution, advising the fall of the Communist International and so on. And so it was a critical sort of time in James' life, this period of the 1930s. I went to Hull, up to Hull, to look in the archives of Jock Haston, who was he was an early British Trotskyist as well. The Haston papers, there was just this folder there just saying Toussaint Louverture in the Haston papers, and I thought it would just be a programme from the original play or something like that. That would be quite good. You know, that would be pretty good just to find that out, really. I mean, there was just this script there, just Toussaint Louverture, without James's name on it. And I think, to some extent, because lots of people would have gone through the Haston papers, various historians, the Labour movement and things, but just would not recognise that this play was actually quite as significant as it was. They'd assumed, you know, the play had long been published or something like that, and perhaps not recognised it was James. So that was all the connection just I made, really. And then, I did my research on it while I was working at Leeds Met, teaching at Leeds Met, living in Chapeltown, so it's very nice to have a launch here in Chapeltown. But so it's finally out, finally came out, published, earlier this year. And we're very lucky. I think to some extent it's a play. It's sort of impossible to judge, really, I think, as a play in its own right until it's been properly performed again, still restaged. But we're very lucky to have Joe Williams, who's going to do some readings of it, and also perhaps share some thoughts as well, perhaps about what he thinks of it as a play, because Joe's worked in theatre, writes a playwright himself, so he would actually do better than me actually judging it perhaps as a play. What I'm going to talk about more is the politics, to some extent, and the context, the historical context a bit about the play. James is best known in some ways when it comes to the Haitian Revolution, writing Black Jacobins, which is an absolute sort of magisterial work on the Haitian Revolution. It came out in 1938. And Toussaint Louverture really is the literary companion volume, I think, to the Black Jacobins, really. It allowed James freedom to explore the character of Toussaint Louverture, the heroic leader of the Haitian Revolution, with more artistic freedom than he had, than he had in a strict kind of historical narrative. He was able to portray really full tragedy and heroism of Toussaint Louverture as a revolutionary leader. Like the Black Jacobins, then, Toussaint Louverture was shaped by James' own experience growing up in the colonial Caribbean, a society shaped by slavery, shaped by the legacies of slavery in terms of race, class and power, injustices of colonial rule and British domination at that time. But there was a kind of very rich kind of indigenous culture, calypso, carnival, in Trinidad. And James was at the forefront of a kind of this anti-colonial culture which kind of came together in the 1920s. There'd been a mass general strike in Trinidad in 1919. There'd been a nationalist movement starting to form around a figure called Captain Cipriani and the Trinidad Working Men's Association. James was attracted to this, even though he was primarily a writer. He wrote short stories about the poor in the barrack yards of Port of Spain. He actually wrote a play that Skins Do Not Lost. He actually wrote a play while he was in Trinidad in the 20s about life in Trinidad, but that seems to have been lost. So he was James was, and for someone who's become attracted, as James was, to the case for West Indian self-government, the British said, black people of the Caribbean, they're not ready for self-government yet. They need, what's needed is good government, was the British line, not self-government. Self-government perhaps, in the future, perhaps at some point when they're educated, when they're civilised, when they're ready. And James was involved in the campaign to actually say, no, we can govern ourselves, thank you very much, at this point. And here, the Haitian Revolution, the memory of the Haitian Revolution, Haiti had been independent 150 years before. And so it was a kind of moment of had a contested legacy, had a contested kind of memory in terms of both struggling for kind of colonial liberation in the Caribbean. It's kind of complicated, but basically it's important in a racist society so shaped by racism as that. You have a figure like Toussaint Louverture who gives a complete lie to black people not capable of governing themselves or somehow intellectually inferior to white people, which is kind of the arguments there, and also making the case for black self-determination at the same time. The Haitian Revolution was this key moment. The Haitian Revolution erupted in 1791 in a French colony, what was then Saint-Domingue, the Caribbean colony. Within 3 years of it erupting, the French, in the middle of the French Revolution, had been forced to abolish slavery across the French Empire. It's quite an amazing kind of historic moment, if you think about, Anyway, if you think about that, then the Haitian Revolution was a 12-year-long struggle, war of national liberation, an anti-slavery struggle, and ended in 1804 with Declaration of Independence. 3 years later, the British were forced to basically end their participation in the Atlantic slave trade. So you can see it's a key. Robin Blackburn is a historian of colonial slavery, describes it as a key describes what he calls a Haitian pivot, a really key moment in a time when colonial slavery seemed like it was inevitable, was going to go on for centuries, and then suddenly it was suddenly it was up for grabs with this barbaric process be able to continue. It stands out, however, the Haitian Revolution stands out not only in the history of colonial slavery, but also in the history of slavery and abolition across world history. Robin Blackburn says that resistance to slavery has been ubiquitous in slave systems, but has usually been particularistic, seeking freedom for a given person or group, and frustrated. In fact, the Haitian Revolution is the only successful, large-scale and generalised slave revolt known in history. So you think about it, it is of world historic importance, the Haitian Revolution. Yeah? And Toussaint Louverture, therefore, figure of kind of world historic importance. It's one of the great revolutions of its age of revolution, age of bourgeois democratic revolution, the English Civil War, French Revolution, American War of Independence, onto the American Civil War. The Haitian Revolution is right there at the heart of that. And although it's been kind of celebrated in Haiti itself, where there's a rich nationalist historiography, outside of Haiti, it's so unthinkable really as what actually happened. But Western scholarship on the Haitian Revolution has just been to damn it really as a race war without any reason or rhyme, dismiss it as something completely peripheral event off in the Caribbean somewhere, irrelevant. So Simon Sharma wrote a book on the French Revolution, which manages to be called Citizens, came out a while ago. Quite a thick book on the French Revolution, doesn't mention slavery or Haitian Revolution once. You know what I mean? Quite shocking, and that's more recent. Think about, I'll comment on the rant about the Tories later, but I mean, William Hague, for example, there's a big book on William Wilberforce. That's the story they like to tell, really, with British state, British ruling class about slavery. It's a story of abolition. And the wonderful parliamentary campaigns of William Wilberforce. No, he has one paragraph in this big book on William Wilberforce about the Haitian Revolution, William Hague. He has no mention of Toussaint Louverture whatsoever in the book. Perhaps part of the problem is that, the Haitian Revolution, there have been lots of great films made about the English Civil War. There's a film called Cromwell, it's not bad, 1970 film. French Revolution, there's always films coming out about that. Les Miserables, obviously, recent example of movies about that. The American Civil War was Lincoln, Django Unchained. There's a lot of films, there's new films, and there's 12 Years a Slave relating to American slavery, so there's films about that. Haitian Revolution, there's not a big film. There's no obvious film you can point people to. There's Queimada, which people are shouting the audience, which is a fine film, 1969 film, Gillo Pontecorvo film, marvellous, stars Marlon Brando. It's set in a colonial Caribbean island, unnamed, not specifically the Haitian Revolution, but it's a marvellous film. It's about black power, it's about the anti-Vietnam War movement, the sentiment is in there. It's a brilliant anti-imperialist film. I recommend go and see it. It's absolutely superb. But we'll get it out, whatever. Go and see it. But as I say, it's unfortunately not explicitly about Haiti. Paul Foot, socialist journalist, once made the point. Hollywood made a film about Spartacus, the leader of the Roman slave revolt, because Spartacus was beaten. Toussaint Louverture was victorious, so they haven't made a film about him. Indeed, the story of San Domingo's slave revolt, perhaps the most glorious victory of the oppressed over their oppressors in all history, is hardly ever told. Hardly ever is not never. I mean, there's some. If people are interested in recent portrayals about the Haitian Revolution, I recommend a literary trilogy by Madison Smart Bell. It's about the Haitian Revolution, a series of novels that came out in the last 10 years or so. Very good novels about it. There's however, a real sort of grouping of representation about the Haitian Revolution in the 1930s, 1920s, 1930s, interwar period, partly because Haiti itself was under American occupation at the time, and also partly because there was, in 1935, fascist dictator Mussolini declared a war on the people of Ethiopia under the banner of trying to liberate them from slavery. Quite well, fascist dictator would be the best person to do this. Was not clear, but in the interwar period, you have a key moment where suddenly the Haitian Revolution seemed to have real resonance for people in not only the anti-colonial movement but more widely. So Aimé Césaire wrote a poem, famous poem, "Return to My Native Land" in that time. Orson Welles in New York tried to turned Macbeth into a play about the Haitian Revolution. Langston Hughes wrote a play. Jacob Lawrence did a wonderful series of artwork about Toussaint Louverture. Sergei Eisenstein, Soviet film director, wanted to make a film with Paul Robeson about the Haitian Revolution, which was never made. Perhaps the greatest film never made. However, what I'm going to talk about here on the bit is really one of the most remarkable ones. Is this play, Toussaint Louverture by CLR James, because in the 1930s in Britain, time of political radicalisation among many kind of intellectuals, there was a growth of political theatre around the Communist Party, around various other groups, and people like Auden, W.H. Auden, and so on. So political theatre was alive in the 30s. However, what's quite remarkable here is this play, because Paul Robeson is unbelievably interesting, given he's the star of the Harlem Renaissance. He stars in London about a play about the Haitian Revolution. It's the only time Paul Robeson starred in a play written by a writer of African descent in his career. And for Robeson, it was a real the chance to star in something like Toussaint Louverture was a real opportunity for him, because he'd been tired of being playing characters which didn't really do justice to a black experience, I think, really mildly, both in film roles where he tended up playing kind of African chiefs and so on, kind of British imperialist films. On the stage, but parts were just never really right. But he needed that for, in terms of his work, to get work. He thought it was better that black people should just take these roles just to get in and get there. However, Robeson was also politically radicalised in the 30s, in the context of mass unemployment and so on. And so Robeson was very attracted by the chance to star in this play. He showed it. It was only the second time ever a play had been staged about the Haitian Revolution in Britain. There had been an earlier play in the 1840s, time of Chartism, called The Black Spartacus, about Toussaint. So it hadn't been staged in Britain for 90 years. You don't make such a play. You don't get a play, on the British stage. There's huge censorship of a British stage, of British theatre at this time. You can't make directly political, anti-imperialist films, let alone films about black liberation struggles. It's also quite important historically in terms of the fact that it got put on, because the way they could avoid the censorship was put on by the Stage Society, which was quite a prestigious society. It used to host private performances that private members could join the Stage Society and then go and watch things. So they could avoid the censorship to some extent that way. The Stage Society was a very prestigious society. Stage plays by Tolstoy, and it was quite internationalist and so on. Chekhov, a lot of world famous playwrights. And they said, look, we'll do it, James, if you can get Paul Robeson to star in, which he managed to do. The participation of Paul Robeson, plus other black professional actors, this guy Robert Adams and Orlando Martins from Nigeria, there were a number of black actors from across the African diaspora who starred in this play. It meant it was the first time black professional actors starred in a play on the British stage, in a play written by a black playwright. So it's historic importance, not only in black British theatre, but in terms of African and Caribbean theatre. To quote just from review, just to give a sense of just how, Joe's going to read some of it, I'm running out of time. So one quick review from the play, from the new leader. This is a paper of the Independent Labour Party, which James was a member of at the time. That the whole play cogently puts the problem of empire with its exploitation and slavery of the coloured people, the civilising ambitions of the capitalist governments, their promises solemnly made and lightly scrapped, their trickery, makes a pretty picture for an audience whose rulers have the largest empire in the world under their domination. The production succeeds in convincing the audience that an empire is nothing of which any white civilisation can be proud. And at the time it was staged, 1936, Mussolini's war on Ethiopia was going on. So in some ways, the fact you had a play about slaves rebelling themselves and showing that liberation comes from below, from the activity of slaves themselves, rather than from imperialist humanitarian interventions from outside foreign governments, well, you know, had real particular resonance for people in the audience. How long do you want to talk? Shall I be quiet? I'll be quiet. A couple of minutes. I'll wind up. I'll quick rant at the Tories, and then I'll go back. I mean, I suppose a couple of things before I'll say rant at the Tories. What the play's about is, quickly, it stresses the agency again of essentially the black enslaved masses as a central story in Toussaint Louverture. He also focused on the importance of revolutionary leadership in the struggle, because in the Haitian Revolution you get the ideals of the Enlightenment: liberty, equality, fraternity, great ideals which were just rhetoric to some extent in the metropolis in France itself. And those ideals, thanks to Toussaint's leadership, become a material reality rooted in the black rebel slave army, which gets built up during the Haitian Revolution and then gets led to victory. And that's really one of the stories that James is really telling in this play. James stressed in the Black Jacobins, Toussaint had the advantage of liberty and equality, the slogans of the French Revolution. They were great weapons in an age of slaves, but weapons must be used, and he used them with offences, finesse, and skill. And really, I think, James in some ways is, he writes Toussaint Louverture as a political intervention. Therefore, it's not, for him, he's trying to tell the story of the Haitian Revolution to a British audience that is just not aware of this story at all. They think the story of slavery and abolition is the story of abolition. That's what 100 years of British scholarship has said about slavery. I mean, Eric Williams once said, you would think the British, wrote about, only invented slavery so they could write about the glory of, abolishing it. And that, in some ways, is how the story was told. His point is, it still is. I'll end with one quick thing. Has anyone heard of General Sir James Duff? It's General. You see, because British history, the Tories at the moment, they're not only waging this brutal class war on the poor, they're not only attacking migrants left, right and centre, they're also trying to rewrite history in the national curriculum. They've had a few problems trying to do this, but essentially they want to make the story about great white men and so on. And there's one, however, they're quite selective when it comes to which great white men they want to talk about. So it's General Sir James Duff, MP, I think even. Yeah, General Sir James Duff MP. He's a great white man by any kind of, by any kind of criteria on that level. He's also emerged early this year, thanks to the work of Catherine Hall and the legacies of British slave ownership. But this General Sir James Duff character, here we are, owned over 200 slaves on the grain sugar estate of Jamaica. In 1833, when in large part thanks to a Jamaican slave revolt of 1831 that finally ended that, so the slavery was ended, the British gave compensation not to the slaves, they gave compensation to the slave owners. So General Sir James Duff goes off to collect some of his money. He collected £4,101, equivalent to more than £3 million today's money, to compensate him for the loss of his property, the slaves. Overall, by the way, the British government paid out 20 million, which in today's money equates to about 16.5 billion. That's how much they gave to slave owners. Okay. Now, anyway, this General Sir James Duff character, he's got rich off not only the brutal exploitation of the slaves themselves, and then gets compensation when he's forced to get kicked out of Jamaica. This General Sir James Duff character has to be, let's get it right, David Cameron's first cousin 6 times removed. So Tories, not only, David Cameron has this workfare program, doesn't he, where it's basically getting the poor essentially to go and work a bit like slaves. And it shows that being a Tory slave driver like Cameron runs in the family. Anyway, I'll end on that point. Okay.